Patrick. I'm a biologist with TRPA, and one of my roles is managing the various AIS control projects that we have. So I have the pleasure today to talk about a little bit of science, show some beautiful pictures, some not so beautiful pictures, and Ted also mentioned the early detection program that we have. We don't have a presentation on that, simply because we haven't found anything, so it's not very exciting necessarily. But I also am very much involved in that, so if you have any questions afterwards, we can certainly address those questions as well. So real quick background and an overview of what we're dealing with here in Lake Tahoe. Eurasian water milfoil and curly leaf pondweed are the two in the nearshore areas of Lake Tahoe that we're really concerned with. I'll say Steve touched upon the Didymo, or rock snot as it's appropriately called, because if anyone's ever experienced it, that's the best way to describe it. Just it's this conglomerate of I don't know, a picture coming up. But that is an issue here in Tahoe. We actually have that species. It occurs in our rivers and streams. So as Steve mentioned, it is a concern for control on the basically minimizing the distribution of that and other species. We also have a number of species that are on our radar because they occur in our backyard or somewhere in the United States where we are aware of a potential introduction. So you're all very aware, I'm guessing, about our prevention program, and we get really concentrated on quagga and zebra mussel, but our prevention program is designed to stop all invasive species that are a potential risk to Tahoe, including aquatic plants. So there's some of these are our resident invasive species, I guess. Curly leaf pondweed on the top left there is particularly nasty for various reasons associated with its natural history. Basically, it gets around a little bit better than water milfoil, if you can believe that. Once it's established, it's a little bit more difficult to get rid of. So we're very concerned with the appearance of curly leaf pondweed and keeping track of its progress. That's another shot. That's the rock snot, I promised you. That's just a rock pulled out of the river. And you can find that, it's not quite that bad, but you can certainly find that in the basin. There's some spots where it does get bad. But not all aquatic plants are horrible things. We do have native species here. They are a very important part of the natural ecosystem, and they fulfill a very important niche. Some of the species that we see in the lake quite often in the same places with invasive species. Alodia, sometimes called waterweed or duckweed, and then there's a native pondweed. There's also a native milfoil. So not all plants are necessarily bad. You might see plants, especially in the mouths of rivers and in marsh areas, and they might be the native species, and they might be a good component there. So don't necessarily run out and start pulling them up. The difference is that these don't grow as large typically, and they grow in those native niches or natural components of the lake. They don't typically grow in the open waters in the nearshore areas like some of the invasive species are able to do. And they also don't, I guess the native species fulfill that niche, so the invasive species don't have the same predators or the same pressures possibly where, for instance, when we've been out removing invasive species, and there's a lot of fragments floating around, I've personally witnessed the ducks just ignoring the milfoil, and then, it's like they don't even care what you're doing, and as soon as one little Alodia come up, and they're right on it, because that's their natural food source, and that's what they're keyed in on, and likely it has a better source of nutrients for them. Also, in those natural components, they do provide good fish cover, basically habitat for other species such as invertebrates, fish. Just a quick history here. Some highlights or lowlights, I guess, as far as the picture in Tahoe. But the main things, the water milfoil showed up here long before we have record of it. Most likely somebody dumped out an aquarium. One advantage that these invasive plants have that quagga and zebra mussel don't have is they're pretty. They look nice and with your fish or maybe in your fish pond. So that is a major vector. A way that they get around is just by pet shops. Water milfoil and curly leaf pondweed are not on the same kind of restrictive list as quagga mussel, for example, where it's illegal to ship them around. Some of these are issues once they get out in a natural environment, but they're not necessarily condemned. You know, they still have a value to aquariums, that sort of thing. Also, 2003 is when curly leaf pondweed showed up while we were doing surveys for the water milfoil. So we've been keeping a close eye on that. And then, as Ted mentioned, in 2009, we adopted the management plan, and I'll go into the specifics a little bit about what that means for plants. Very small words, don't worry about trying to read this, but the main point here is this kind of tracks the progress of invasive plants as we know it. Starting back in '95, we really started documenting them more carefully. As Ted mentioned, one of the things we got planned this year is to update the survey and get a picture of what it looks like in 2010. Sorry, 2011. Basically, besides the progress where it started showing up in some satellite locations, like the North Shore, Tahoe Cavern, the other thing to see here is the yellow triangles for curly leaf pondweed, and they seem to be spreading in a general northwest or northeast direction. Sorry, from the southern shore. And like I said, we're very concerned with that because it's a little bit more difficult to get rid of, just by elements of its natural history. So what does it say in the management plan? Basically, the species I just gave you an overview of identifies what the problems are that are here, as well as what the potential problems are of tomorrow, and what we need to address through those three tiers: the control, prevention, and early detection and monitoring. It also identifies some of the tools available to the greater good. So it's not necessarily, doesn't get into what should you do here, what should you do there, what can you or can you not use in Tahoe. It just identifies what the picture is. What are some of the management techniques available. So what we do use here in Tahoe is generally physical removal. And that can be the combination of hand pulling, just walking around and pulling where you can actually reach down. Most of the work is done by underwater diving, either scuba or from a permanent air supply from the surface. And again, just actually hand pulling the plants, especially where they're dispersed and it's not a mat or a carpet of plants necessarily. Where there is a carpet, we apply another strategy, and that's laying down bottom barriers, either synthetic material or natural materials like you would see for like erosion control mats. And basically all these do is restrict the light that's on the bottom, and it gives us a chance to gain some ground on those larger populations and knock them back for a year, or then it becomes more of a maintenance population, and we can use other techniques. So it's a way to efficiently treat very large areas, and we've been experimenting with this in the past. And I'll go into a little bit about research we have planned for this year. But that's our main strategy here at the lake. The other one is that maybe you're familiar with is the harvesting. Basically, when the plants have gotten ahead of us and you're just trying to maintain passage, either for boats or for water, just so that the system doesn't become completely clogged up. You have to just remove all that biomass, all the actual plant material. Moving through a couple of these others, potential tools in the toolbox, but not things that we are using or planning to use this year. So what do we have planned for this year? Like I said, we're updating the surveys, and we are also looking at ways to take a look at other lakes, other areas where it's not as easy to get to. What kind of remote sensing data do we already have that we can use to locate some of those populations? And we're also looking into cost-benefit analysis of our various methods that we use, so that we can use that research to make better management in the future. Maybe how to change our approach, or hey, if we're doing well, then we know what to stick with. And then, of course, the control and eradication efforts themselves. So everywhere in the lake that has an infestation is part of the plan, but with limited resources, we basically use a prioritized treatment strategy, where those areas where we get the most benefit from our dollar, basically, and time spent, is where we put to the top of the list. And again, this year we're only proposing physical removal. So why do you care? How does AIS affect you? First, there's the impacts that you can see. Can't get your boat through there. That's one way it's definitely impacting you. Gets it clogged up on your prop, potential damage to your boat. It also kind of discourages recreational activities. It's not as pretty. You don't want to hang out where the water's all clogged up and green rather than beautiful blue. So we definitely see that as an impact. Impeding water flow and affecting water quality, sometimes visible and very real impact of invasive plants. But then also areas where maybe you don't realize that it's the plant affecting that change. Clarity is certainly in the nearshore areas. Invasive plants are just one thing that's keeping the snowball running as far as preserving lake clarity. So we identify that as an impact, one of the reasons to try to control invasive plants. And then maybe if you're not paying attention, suddenly you just have one plant instead of the diverse flora that you had at one time. So some information here basically on where we're planning on going, but I think I'm out of time. That's about all I have for you. But I guess one thing I haven't touched on that's important here is fundraising. So as Steve mentioned, we are very fortunate here to have resources currently and a lot of national attention. That may not always be the case, and the invasive plants aren't necessarily going to go away when the funding goes away. So again, forming those partnerships and having that commitment to continuing the control project and the fight against the invasive species we already have.